All right, good evening and welcome to the Public Safety Building Committee meeting for February 4th. Just wanted to open and thank everyone for their flexibility. As you know, Vertex notified me that they had agenda items that couldn't wait till February 11th, so I appreciate everyone being able to reschedule and move the meeting up a week to tackle some of the topics we'll be working through tonight. Our first item of business is approval of meeting minutes from January 14th, 2019. The meeting minutes were prepared by Mr. Lyons, circulated in the packet. Are there any questions, comments, or changes? Seeing none, I'll move that we accept the meeting minutes as presented. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Officer. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? One abstention, Mike. Next item is review and approval of IT items requiring procurement. So there was an extensive listing in the packet. The committee was also circulated floor plans of the building to facilitate any questions. I guess before we go through and I turn the floor over to Tom, I'll ask as he walks through this if any items are pressing and require us to make a vote tonight. If there's anything that people are have any reservations about, I think some of this stuff probably can easily buy, but I think as a follow-on to last meeting, the committee had a desire to understand everything that may come before us in terms of a cost so that we can make educated decisions on other aspects of the project. As I went through and started to think about some of the items that we're going to be talking about tonight, I posed a question to Mark and Brian, because even though a lot of this stuff is in our town in the project budget, I had a concern about putting this with all the other items that we're bonding over 30 years, given that we'll probably go through many computers, many phones, and Wi-Fi hotspots, et cetera. So the plan is for any items that do come out of our project budget that they would get a shorter term bond under this project for 3 years to cover the costs, so that we're not paying more interest over time than the actual item costs itself for whatever we approve. So that was a huge sticking point for me, that even though we had items in the budget, to make sure that we were doing something that was fiscally responsible in terms of not, these are things that would normally be in the town operating budget for a regular replacement plan and just paid for with regular cash as opposed to finance. So I just wanted to bring that up before we ventured into any of the details here. So any questions on that? Okay, so then I think the best way to go about this is, what I'll do, Tom, is maybe just walk through your memo, go through each item, what you've done, what input the chiefs have had, and then I think at certain points I may ask Chief Paulus to come up and just explain some of the requests. I also did chat very quickly with Chief Morrow, and he didn't think any of his requests required further explanation, but I get that this was a push and pull between you looking at the floor plans, but also the departments assessing their needs. Does that make sense?
Yes, that is.
Okay, so we'll start with the phones.
Okay. So with the phones, that was really looking at, actually let me get to that floor plan, sorry, real quick. That one's a little bit harder, just they're really small pins, and I do apologize for that. I looked at what the existing phones are that we have, the inventory at police and fire, and I looked at the desk locations in the plans. Pretty much wherever there's a desk, there's a phone being placed, plus additional requirements for within dispatch for the fact that they need to be able to be within reach of a phone no matter what's going on at that moment. So the pins on here represent two different models of phones. Generally speaking, we have older phones that are currently in place at the police and fire departments. A newer style phone that we've started rolling out would be all of the replacements. So it really was just going through and doing a count, a physical count, and this number really reflects that. I have trimmed it back a little bit by honing in some of the extra phones and whatnot. But I did just find out that there was an additional server piece that is required. So it is a little bit of a give and take, but the number that's before you is certainly within that. Okay.
So, and on this, I'm just, with each other, I'm gonna say,
Yep.
need to know now, or just, this is informational and we can, we
This
need
is-
to know by when?
Informational, I can determine what the lead time is.
Okay.
For you, on basically
Just
all of
everything?
these.
Okay.
Really, it's gonna come down to when we need, especially when we start talking about networking. That's probably gonna be the biggest key, because that'll impact, potentially radios and the alerting system and everything else. So, but I don't think any of this is need to buy tomorrow.
Okay.
And I will also preface all of this with the fact that I've had brief conversations with Technology Committee, but have not reviewed specific specs yet.
Okay. So, just before I open up to questions, just to level set, from a budget perspective, we had 50,000 for phones and 150,000 for computer, IT, network hardware. Just because it's in our budget, we obviously don't need to spend it, but obviously when you take the totality of what's being presented to us tonight, we're well under budget, so I think that's obviously a very positive start. So I think as we go through each of these, we're just gonna be assessing, what questions anyone has and, providing further direction or follow-up. So with that, I will open it to questions. I saw Mr. Officer first, and I'll go to Mr. Rooney.
This, just briefly, looking at the memo in the part that's labeled Public Safety Building Technology Budget Narrative, it looks like, unless I'm reading it wrong, you're calling for an additional 25 phones, but you've priced out 30.
Yes, I just saw that typo myself.
Okay, fair enough.
So it
I'm
is
just trying to
25.
understand if I misread that, or if we had some
It
extras
is
lying around.
25.
Okay, thank you.
If you go down to page,
Yeah, it's,
where he explains it down here, yeah, it's
Mhm.
right on 25 units at the
Yep.
2.
and it sums to the total on the front
Okay.
page.
Thank you.
Mr. Rooney? Okay, Ms. Cook?
Some of what I'm going to ask may be outside your bailiwick, but I think we've got people here that can chime in too. So to add on to what Jason just said about what's in the overall budget for phones and for technology, the $200,000, I think it's worth mentioning that was really more like a placeholder. There was not a lot of work done to come up with that budget. We had something in there, so it was kind of a maybe educated guess to do it there. So I don't want us to get really excited by the fact that you've got $78,000 here against 200. If we can still cut more out of that, every dollar saved is a lot saved down the road because of the interest on the debt, et cetera. So, having said that, phones. Why do we need so many phones? Are you saying that we've got that? Why do we have so many desks, I guess is my first question.
So I will say that that is out of what I would.
That's why I
be
looked
able to
over here.
answer, so.
So, how many people work between the fire department and the police station during the shift that has the most people in it? Which I assume is daytime. 9 or 10? And chief? Probably about the same. So 20?
You guys might want to get a mic or navigate this way, just if there's going to be questions on department operations.
So does every single person that works there, regardless of a shift, have their own unique desk, or do you share desk? Or are you planning on sharing desk in the new building?
Over at the police operation, the superior officers or the specialists would have their own workstation. And the dispatch, obviously, and the business administrator.
So it would be the same for fire. You have administratively, you have the business administrator who works during the day, the fire prevention officer, myself as the chief. There's an office in there for the EMS coordinator who could be in and out. We have also phones and offices on the other side of the building when the firefighters are there. So in our side, the business line rings. When the administration is not there, the firefighters have to answer the phone. So we do have people who call with emergency-type situations on our business line. So if there's no phone upstairs, they're not getting anybody. So we need phones. So
Okay.
it's a little bit quirky on
Are
that.
there any desks that are shared between shifts, so just a?
Yeah, so there's an office in that, on that one side of the building that's shared by multiple people. So there's no need for more than one phone in there.
Okay, so the floor plan that we see here with all the places marked, are for desks that are, it just sounds like it's a lot of desks to me as far as the number of people that are there. But you're saying we do hotel, so, you know, the hotel concept is, you know, a person comes in the first shift, leaves, takes, you know, puts their stuff away, second person comes in and uses that same
Yes.
desk. So it sounds like you are doing some of that.
So like on our site, it's not necessarily on a desk per se. So we have a phone on the apparatus floor, let's say. It's a wall-mounted phone. It's not a desk, but it's there in case the firefighters have to answer the phone during the day when there's no administration there. So we have the wall phone there and a couple in other various places, like upstairs in the kitchen, there's a phone up there. So there's always somebody within earshot of those areas that can answer a phone.
That's a lot. So have you two sat down with Tom and looked at this? It's a lot of phones, 15 wall-mounted phones?
So the wall-mounted phones, a lot of them are locker rooms, exercise room. For dispatch, there's 2 wall-mounted phones in there for the kitchen and, believe it or not, the bathroom. Because if you only have one dispatcher on, they have to be able to answer the phone wherever they are, basically. Chief mentioned apparatus bay. There's actually 2 because of the layout and how deep the bay is. Really, it's try to get people get to that phone within a few rings. So,
Do we have that many phones, or covering that many places in the current building?
yes.
Okay. So have you two sat down and looked at this and agreed that we need this many phones?
Yes, we went over it with Tom, room by room.
Okay, so,
Mr. Lyons?
No, I was just gonna add too, it's used as a paging system too, right? The phone system?
Yeah, that's correct.
Mr. Rooney?
The licenses, do you have to renew those on an annual basis?
No.
Back to Mr. Lyons.
Tom, the only thing I didn't see in here, how is the recording done? Is it through state 911 or is it a private recorder?
Currently, it's an add-on onto I believe only the dispatch lines record, and that would just be moved over.
Okay, none of the police phones, chief, are recorded at all? None of the other phones?
Just the ones in dispatch. We're so cramped in now that that's all we need.
It's just there would be an additional cost of licenses for recording other phones.
Correct.
That I didn't see in here.
No.
I assume this takes into account just the fact, I get that it can be used as like a backup paging system.
Mhm.
Fire's gonna have a fire alerting system. I get the need for phones and bays, but given that folks have cell phones these days, right, I can't speak necessarily as much for the police side, but
Mhm.
just looking at like the sergeant's office, right, I kind of looked at how everything's spread out.
Yep.
And that just seems, given that, and I asked Chief Paulus about this, there's a lot of phones in that office and you're never gonna have 5 sergeants on. Is there something we're doing with the town voicemail system or ability to kind of share phones as opposed to not having
So
a phone for each individual person?
we certainly could, and today that's what we are doing. I believe each officer has their own voicemail. They don't necessarily have a phone associated to that voicemail. However, I look at that as if I'm assigned the one desk that's the furthest away from the phone, and I need to, place a call, am I going to walk away from my desk? And that goes to the question of hoteling on the workstations. So it's a little bit of a convenience thing. Are we issuing town cell phones to all the officers? And if not, then, do you want official police business being conducted on personal cell phones? That comes into another discussion as well.
I mean, I'm gonna defer to
Yeah.
the chiefs on how they wanna operate their business. I just was hoping that we're like thinking ahead, given that we're building a building for the future and we're not just
Yes.
replacing things that just we had in the past. Are there any other questions on phones? All right, let's move on to wireless access points.
This one, I do not have a floor plan for you at this time. What I did was used the vendor that we are currently using for our firewall and our wireless access points. And they actually have an application that I can do what's called a heat map on with the access points. I started off with placing one at every location that was in the design, which I believe is on the order of 28. And from there, I pared back and recognized areas that didn't necessarily need to have an access point at that time or really good Wi-Fi coverage. And really, it came down to about 20 access points between first floor, second floor, and I believe it's 2 in the apparatus bay because of the sheer size of it.
So I guess just one question, so
Yep.
the plans call for 28, you went down to 20. Those 8 spots that you chose not to use?
Yep.
Are there like caps there or something, like if we ever needed to tap into it in the future?
The wires would still be there. I wouldn't do a change order to eliminate the
We don't
wiring.
know. Yeah.
Because, again, if you do run into a situation where we need a little bit more, the wires are there at
Okay.
least.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't gonna do that. Any, go ahead.
And these are the same as like this building where we can have segregated network so that there's a private network for town business and one that's open to the public, or if we have guests in doing vendor work or something like that, they could still access the internet but have absolutely no access to town resources.
Ms. Cook?
I hope you're still my friend tonight. If you will. Okay, we've already had this, so it's my understanding that a access point covers about 3,000 square feet as a kind of rule of thumb. Why do we need to cover the apparatus space with wireless?
So the apparatus have laptops on them for data entry and whatnot. And again, future coverage. That would shave off 2 if we took those 2 off. So yes, it's a savings.
It's just 2, so it'd be 18, so it's not.
Right.
So can you go back and talk to CDW and see why I can buy the Cisco at $527 and you're having to pay $614 for the one that they've quoted you?
So-
I mean, I didn't try very hard to
Yep.
get the price I got.
Yep. So part of that is that this is enterprise wireless. Okay. These are managed. I don't have to go and configure each one individually. I do it all through a central server.
Neither do I. Mine's set up for the same guest and private, so I think it would be worthwhile to push back a little bit and just say that,
And I will say I did push back on that one, and I did get slightly better pricing. But, that is, that's the enterprise level that I'm recommending for this, so.
okay. How much square footage do we have between the first, second, third floor beyond the apparatus space? So everything else, how much in total do we have?
Does anyone have that number?
Building's 35.
35?
I think the apparatus space, I want to say somewhere, about 9,500.
Okay, but you're using 2 in the apparatus space, you already said that. So you're using 18 for the other 35,000?
Yeah.
So if, you didn't say you agreed, but if you agree that 3,000 square foot is kind of a rule of thumb for access points, then 18 times 3 would be 54,000. So 20 is what you think is the right, or 18 is the right number for the 35,000 square feet?
Based on the program that I was looking at, that gave the radius of really strong coverage.
All right.
You've got a lot of walls.
That's the other
I
thing.
can't go any further, I just know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
in my analogy may not be good, that
Yeah.
a 6,000 foot square
Yeah.
foot office is non-analogous to 35 is
Yeah,
what you're trying to do it, so I don't know.
Different walls interact differently. Glass, believe it or not, actually is somewhat worse than drywall. Concrete and steel, they all create some interference, so it's.
Okay.
Any other questions on wireless access points? Okay, network equipment?
Network equipment, this includes the main fiber interface switch to have our fiber network hosted there and hubbed out to this building, Cordville Hall, library, and then eventually potentially other buildings. And that is a that's a higher end switch with redundant power supplies and, you know, the ability to have some failures, because that's probably the one place that we don't want to lose a single piece of equipment that can take down the entire town. Okay, so that's around $600 plus the power supplies. And then we get into individual switches, which is based on the plans for the phones and the access point. That's about 3 power over Ethernet switches. And then for all the workstations and other data drops, we're looking at 6 regular non-PoE switches. These are, what I've priced out here is 10 gig switches. So they're, again, enterprise level. They are HP switches. They have limited lifetime warranty, layer 3. So I can segregate the network just about any way I want, down to the single wall jack that I can say, you know, that one is not able to access, you know, specific resources, or if we need to tie in, you know, state-specific networking, we can do that to other locations in the building in the future, so.
Any questions on that? Kathy?
Sorry. So we talked about this one too. So I'm looking at the quote that I've got. It's described exactly like this is described here, and these are 1144 for Cisco. So can you push back on that one too, and just see if you can't get?
Yep, so, and as I mentioned to you, you know, I'd have to make sure it's apples and apples.
Yep.
Make sure that they are layer 3 switches and all that.
I'll leave you with this so you can
Yep,
see.
and then, you know, there are some that are a little bit less expensive. They have lesser throughput. So again, I'm very aware of the idea of a dollar saved, you know, really multiplies. But I'm also trying not to go into the building and in a year go, well, we need to upgrade these. My hope is, as a one-person department, that I can put them in and not touch them for 10 years. That may not be a realistic goal, but that's what I'm really hoping. So, you know, it might be a little bit more to get some better features, but I'm certainly open to looking at these.
We don't want you to have to do that either, so we're on your side on that one too. But why 9? I mean, I've got 1 for a, 15-person office. Why do you need 9?
So again, it's the number of data drops that we have. You know, will we have data drops that we're not using? Yes, we probably will. But in the event that we need them, do I want to be running out and having to delay other work? So there is wiggle room on that, yes. This is, I'll be honest, this is a turnkey. It's done. You know, we get in, we're done. As opposed to, again, a year down the road going, well, we need to expand our access.
You got 450 ports. Ports is what you're going to have in the 9.
Right.
Okay. All right. Okay, enough of that one.
Just where are the servers? Are we not buying any new servers? Everything's just coming over?
Servers, as of right now, are going to migrate over. The plan is, the technology budget request for FY20 includes migrating some services to cloud services, which would free up resources. So the thought is to take a year off of any kind of hardware replacement for that and really reevaluate our needs. So it's a strategic at this point.
Okay.
But yes,
This budget
everything-
won't be available a year from now, so
No, I know, and
if this building needs something, we need to at least consider it. I'm not advocating to.
no, the police and fire server was just replaced last year, so that one is,
Okay.
yeah, that, I wouldn't put that on the town at this point to do that.
Any other questions on network equipment?
One more. So police and fire have their own server, which will be in the building.
Currently,
So a
yep.
minute ago, you talked about the fiber going to Corderville Hall.
Mhm.
So what is that used for?
So what that will be is, actually, all the servers will eventually end up at police and fire, because it is the best server room that we will have in our network. And what that fiber network is for is access for those buildings that are connected. Internet all goes through there. Right today, the internet access for this building, for library and Cordoville Hall, all go through Cordoville Hall over that fiber. So
So where's the fiber right now? Where does it run from, what to what?
it runs from this building, library, and Cordoville Hall.
This
So it's-
building to library to Cordoville Hall?
Yep.
Okay, and then now it's gonna run to the new
And-
building, so you'll have 4 buildings.
Correct. And that fiber is actually already at the pole at Public Safety.
Any other questions on network? All right, before we go into printers and copiers, I'll just, because I know Chief Paulus has additional requests in this, Chief, I don't know if you want to speak to kind of how you requested your equipment before I let Tom kind of run through how he spec'd it out?
Not quite sure what you're asking me. We went over the needs. Obviously, it's a much more expansive building than the shoebox that we're in now. So it doesn't make it as convenient to, there used to be a full-size copier in my office. When I got there, it was very old. When it died, it's nothing for me to go down, 1 flight of stairs. Takes me 2 minutes to get to the copier. That's not going to exist in this building. So we're asking for 1 more full-size copier downstairs to handle all the traffic there. As far as computers go, I think that we were up 4. Right now, we have 2 report writing stations for patrol officers, 12 patrol officers. We had a call, say, the end of a shift like we had this weekend, can have all 4 working into overtime. Right now, they mitigate probably into the dispatch area to use one of their computers to complete their reports. That shouldn't be happening. Dispatch should be its own standalone station where it's quiet, they can do their job. So I had 4 desktops over in the new report writing station. Just in looking at it, there'll be 1 in a supervisor's office right there. I mean, if it was really that important, I could cut 1 out of there. And there's 1 extra one for a detective sergeant and a court officer. Those have been separated in the past. Right now, they're 1 and the same. So we have an extra one for that, although that can change at any time. When they rebid, I can have a separate court officer and a separate sergeant. So we're basically coming over with 4 new computers. If you want to cut 1 or 2, we can do that, but we'll probably end up replacing them, in the near future. So if anybody has any other questions, I can answer them.
So I'm gonna let Tom just walk through kind of what you spec'd out based on the chief's needs, and then open up to broader questions.
So I'm going to start on the fire side, just because that's a pretty easy one. So this is the first floor of the building here. Okay. So in the admin office, there's 1 full-size copier. If you're interested to see, it's the same copier that's in the copy room here in this building. It does copy, fax, scan, scan to email. We'll do secure print on this, so, the idea is, chief could release a job, and it doesn't actually come out the printer until he walks up and swipes his card. Okay, so there's privacy built into it that way. And then in the back, there's what I'm calling a small format copier. It's really a multifunction printer, does copy, fax, scan. We wouldn't have the fax hooked up, but it does allow for when either the officers or EMTs or whomever's doing reports, they can do their printout, they can scan, they can, again, email. These would all be networked, so again, anyone could print from anywhere in the building to them, but the idea is that that's kind of how they're segregated in this particular model. And really the reason for doing 2 separate ones here as opposed to just the 1 main copier is if you look at plans, anyone working in this back section of the office of the department would have to come out the apparatus bay, come back in and get their print job. So it is a bit of a convenience thing, but it is also a significant reduction from what they currently have.
So this one is color too?
It is bid out at color. partially because the price difference is on the order of $50, okay? And it can be set up that it requires a code to be put in to print to color so that it's available, but it really just makes you think whether or not you need to print in color.
Well, it's not the cost of the color versus the black and white, it's the cost to replace the tone, you know, it's
Yep.
10 times for color.
Right.
It's the cost per, so, you know, you really do want to minimize the color
Yes.
printing.
Exactly, and to that point, all of these printers would be billed per page, okay? So it'd be toner and maintenance on them, charged per page. So anywhere between half a penny for black and white to a penny for black and white, and then up to 5 cents or 7 cents for color. So
So 10
yes,
times.
it is a big difference. So yes, it's a matter of putting, I don't want to say a roadblock in there, but more a speed bump to make someone really think, do I need to print this in color?
So you can do that.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And really, that's all there is for the fireside. There are no printers upstairs, you know, partially because there's no computers up there. So, so that's where everything is there, okay? Switching gears, I'm gonna deal with this separately. Dispatch, it really is its own department. It should, you know, they shouldn't be distracted by people coming and going to get print jobs, in my opinion. So that is, again, a small format copier, has Copyfax scan. Again, it's priced out at color for that same reason, that for the short money, and I'd rather put it in one unit than in a year have them say, well, we need to print color, so we're gonna put a second printer right next to this one, okay? Moving on, in the back we have the dispatch area. This is just a desktop black and white LaserJet, okay? Again, billed out per page.
That's the booking, that's the
Booking,
salary
sorry,
point,
that's
right?
that's the booking, yes. And again, to print something from booking and go get it somewhere else does not make sense, to myself anyway, okay? Moving on, we have, this is identified as the existing leased copier. Full-size copier, Copyfax, scan, no fax hooked up to it, but it is there as a capability. Available to the supervisor as well as these report writing stations, okay? And then the request was made to put an additional LaserJet printer, again, black and white, in the sergeant's office, okay? And I believe the reason for that is the sergeant's office may be locked when the officers need to print, so that's why you have two different ones. The hash mark shading on these two spaces here was really to indicate that if these spaces are being used, especially in an EOC environment, these two printers become readily available for that space. We don't need to invest in more printers for EOC to function. Okay. Any questions on the first floor before I move up to the second floor? Okay. Page up. Okay. There we go. Second floor. Right here would be the main business copier for the PD. This would, again, be Copyfax scan. The request was to make sure that is fax enabled. For really, that would be available for anyone on this level. That would be the only color printer on this level. I didn't spec out the other two as color because this one's available. Okay.
This is just police, it's not
This is
technically
just
available.
police, yes.
Fire
Yes.
does not have access to this.
Yes, that is correct. And then in the detectives and school resource officer, court officer, there's an additional desktop printer and one in the chief's office. Both of those were per request of the police chief. Okay. I will say that I've said it for a couple of years that printing to copiers is cheaper than to individual printers. I did prove it out through the numbers. On average, it's a penny per black and white versus 4 cents per black and white. Doesn't sound like much, But on an average year, that's over $1,000 savings just for these two departments, so.
How long's the contract with the charges?
It's renewable every year.
So it's only a one-year contract?
Yep.
Can you, I asked you this offline, but I think the community would benefit.
Yep.
You mentioned there's a lease copier that's coming down from the PD,
Yes.
but you're proposing to buy
Yep.
a new copier. Just walk the committee through why you're proposing to buy versus lease.
So, I did this out. Besides the PD copier, there is a small one that is currently on lease in COA, and that's because the funds weren't immediately available to be able to replace it. And the lease price over the course of almost 4 years, 3.5 years, it's almost 40% more to lease than to buy it. Okay, you're still paying click charges, you're still, but you're paying finance charges. So my thought is, if we have the funds available, go ahead and buy, and we avoid any interest on it. Now, granted, we have interest with the bonding, but that's, I can certainly get pricing on leases, but at least this way here, if we don't want to go with the click charges and we want to just buy toner ourselves, we can do that after year one,
Mr. Rooney?
So, I'm gonna show you my ignorance in this area and ask you to keep the laughter to a low din. I'm able to receive and send faxes from my desktop.
Yes.
Why do we need separate fax machines? Do the desktops not have that capability?
So this is something that MTC is certainly, it's on their radar to look at, is the number of fax machines. With that said, unfortunately, there are still services that require fax. They see fax as more secure than email. Some of these being medical records. And my understanding is that those have to be faxed and not emailed. So all of these have the capability. Whether we hook them up or not, that's a different story.
It's built into the machine, though. They're not buying a separate fax machine, so it's
Right.
part
Right, I
of one
understand
machine. They
that.
can
Right,
do
Right,
fax.
it's a matter of maintaining an additional phone line.
Right.
Now, one interesting thing about that, and I'm not sure how it's going to work with public safety, is many alarm panels require an analog phone line still. And generally speaking, in most of the existing buildings, those are the lines that we use for fax machines. And basically what happens is the alarm panel just takes over the phone line if needed, and fax is not considered a high priority, so we do that.
Can you, so I think when you look at it from a financial perspective, obviously we're being asked to add a color copier at $8,000 to police, whereas in fire is more, I'll call it a replacement that you probably would have been doing through the annual town budget process within the next year or so. What is the difference between the $8,000 option and the $900 option, given that they all have all four functions?
Yep.
Just so that when we make a decision on this eventually, we understand what we'd be giving up if we didn't do all four, because I think that's important to
Yeah,
understand.
I think the biggest thing is the duty cycle. The idea that, the full-size copier is designed to handle more throughput. So it theoretically will have a longer life expectancy.
What's the service contract you're getting with these, if you buy them?
That's what it is. It's the per click. They'll come out, they'll do the maintenance, toner, when we can either set it up that they monitor the toner and they automatically ship it, or when one is running low, I can call and they have it here the next day.
And that's for the small machines as well?
Yes.
And the click charge for the small machines is roughly the same?
That is, I believe it is a penny per, black and white. I believe that's right. Yes. Yeah. So, and like you said, I did the analysis of the existing machines, and it was on average 4 cents per page.
Any other questions on printers?
I will also say that I did price them out separately from this company, and you can get them a little bit cheaper, but you end up paying more for the toner. So
Well, the toner is the killer in the whole thing, as we
Oh.
all know. The machines are cheap, it's the
Always.
toner that kills you.
Always.
Yeah.
And the other nice thing about this plan is that there's 3 different models throughout the entire building, which means I only have to stock 3 spares of toner. You know, even in emergency, that's it, you know, I throw it from one end.
So Chief, do you guys really do that much color printing?
We don't do a lot of color
I
printing,
mean, you're
no.
printing reports for the most part, right? Is that not the main use of printers?
Yes.
So the only thing, I mean, I came in here thinking they only need 1 big one. I actually do think they need 2 big ones now, but I don't know that they need 2 other color printers. Because I know you can set it up, but I just know when I look at that bill every month, I just go, I cannot believe we printed this much color stuff. And it's a lot of money every month, and this is, you know, a fraction of what you're talking about. So I would push back on needing the extra color printers. Maybe 1, maybe 0, as long as you got the 2 big ones that can print color when you need color. You know, you'll have the 2 big ones that can always do color. So I'm not sure you need the other 2 to be color.
Like I said, it was just looking at it, and I can get you the specifics, I don't have it right in front of me.
No, and I'm
But
nitpicking,
it
I mean,
was-
this is
It was like
small money.
$30
Yeah, this is
difference.
small money, but it's
So.
the per page cost of the color.
Any other questions on printers? Anything you want to say? I know Chief kind of alluded to the 4 computers he requested. Anything you want to say on the workstations?
Yeah, I was just speaking with Fire Chief, and we have agreement to reduce that by 1 on their side. I was speaking to the person who's currently a court officer, who is also a sergeant, and realized that while there's 2 desks assigned for those 2 different positions, it can be set up with a laptop, so it's not 2 full stations. So this is still definitely, you know, being honed down, but I feel very comfortable with that number ballpark. You know, I don't foresee it jumping another $10,000 or anything like that. You know, I'm looking for savings by, you know, seeking additional vendors and looking at different models. But it is, that's kind of where we're at.
So the 6 is down to 5 now, or 4?
The 6 is down to, I believe it's 5, and potentially with 1 more to be reduced.
So the one thing that's not on here, because you probably can't get on here, what is the cost of installing all of this? I assume you're not gonna run around, trying to do this yourself.
That is essentially the plan. I am, again, very aware of,
The access points?
yeah, I mean, it will not take long, so whether I enlist some help from facilities or enlist some help from technology committee if they're able, you know, it's not going to take on the order of days to do this. It is, I'm very aware of the value add to the town, and willing to put in that work for this, so.
So just before I open for public questions, I think we clearly have a preview. I think we have a ceiling, is what I'm hearing, of what it would cost. We're developing a floor.
Yep.
I think Tom has obviously put a ton of effort in, and he hasn't installed anything yet. But my recommendation with how we proceed on these items are, if you have individual questions, certainly feel free to ask Tom, you know, as you think about what was presented tonight. I'll keep it on the agenda. And what I would also like to do is I plan to contact the MTC. I've contacted them a few times, haven't gotten a reply yet, but I'll try again and say that we need them to weigh in, just to make sure that we are approaching this the right way, from buying the right, to answer a lot of Kathy's questions, right? Buying the right equipment, buying the right type, and that they're not foreseeing specific changes in how the town does things moving forward that would change the equipment that we're buying. But then I think, assuming the MTC agrees with what Tom's recommendations are, I think we'll bring it back to a future meeting for votes. And I think, you know, my view remains the same, that, you know, we do need to defer to the chiefs of the department for what it takes to run an operation. And I think we obviously have to have With that, we also have to have financial rigor around it, so just balancing the two, and getting to where we end up at the end of the day. So, anyone have any differences of opinion with that approach moving forward? Okay, Mr. Litt, did you have a comment?
I had a question, Tim Litt, Woodland Road. Hi, Tom. When you're talking workstations, are you talking desktops?
Primarily they're desktops, but there are some laptops.
Because I think one thing I would look at, and I found worked out fairly well in industry, is wherever possible to go with docking stations and laptops, because that gives you flexibility for meetings, training, things that might happen off-site. It obviously doesn't make sense for a dispatcher where you know it's wired in place, but almost everywhere else, that's worked out really well, even if it costs, more than a standalone desktop. Long run seems like a better approach, at least to think about.
Okay. Any other questions for Tom? Thank you so much for the time and the effort.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, we're going to move into 4, Chairman's Update, Committee Tour. So the last meeting we talked about arranging a tour for the committee. You'll notice in the Owner's Project Manager report, they still haven't poured the concrete to enable the stairs to access the second floor. So Bill from Vertex has been keeping me updated on that. Kevin will have more on actually when the concrete's getting poured. But as soon as that's poured, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be in the facility and we'll arrange a date. Ideally looking probably at a Saturday morning, but I put it contingent on them already being there for other things, not coming in just to walk us around. So stay tuned. Wish I had a date. No, a future Saturday.
Oh,
Yeah.
This Saturday would be
yeah.
good, but
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I want to get in there and look.
If we got on this side, we've all
So
been very happy.
that's where we stand on that. At the last meeting I raised during Chairman's Update, that there have been some numbers flying around related to this project in the annual town budget presentations. I've had a pretty extensive dialogue with Mark and Brian in the finance team. I have not gotten the numbers that I've asked for yet, but I know they have 1,000 other things they're prioritizing. What I do know is in the original Board of Selectmen packet that had the original budget, the impact of this project on next year's budget was listed at over 2%. That I came as we started to do the math. That was an aggregate number of what year 1 and year 2 of the debt. So they basically are borrowing the debt in 3 tranches over 3 years. So that was an aggregate number. In addition, that number is now down to 0.7%, and my understanding is it continues to move south, which is great. But what I have asked, and my understanding is we will have a firm presentation on this by town meeting, is what this project is, how it is impacting the tax rate, but also triangulating that data back to the presentation that most of this committee members and I stood up and gave when this project was approved, showing that this project actually is going to cost the taxpayer less than what they originally showed it as. The latest numbers, we're continuing to operate on a gross, right? So before factoring in kind of some of the school debt runoff, the latest numbers are showing, a decent savings, which makes sense given how much money we've saved on the project to date. And that doesn't even factor in some of the interest costs that will be saved by not having to borrow as much. So I just wanted to bring everyone up to speed on that. When we have firm numbers, I think some combination of myself, Mark, Brian, and the advisory members will make a presentation back, because I think it's important that this committee understand how the math is working, because we do get questions, and the number of questions, thankfully, that have come my way have dissipated, but had a few moments there where I was like, what happened, sort of thing. So I thank Mark and Brian for keeping an open mind and re-examining how that was being presented, but I think there's still some more reconciliation to be done so that we can properly articulate it to all. Any questions on that? Just in terms of monthly project-related updates, I continue to have a pretty active dialogue with Kevin, as some of these items have come up over the last month that kind of needed us to move forward the meeting. I think he's been doing a great job with Bill of keeping me up to date on everything that is happening on the site and making sure that we are moving in the right direction. So I think with that, I will move to item 5, which is the monthly update. Kevin?
Sure, thank you very much. I do apologize, I did not bring my adapter to show you the pictures of the fire station. However, the photographs that we're gonna go off are the ones that are already in the monthly report. So I apologize for not being able to do it on the screen. So where we are right now, to be honest with you, luckily we are very minimally impacted by the snow right now. We've had a couple of inches now. It's the mud that becomes an issue that bogs you down. But in looking at the photographs of where we are, you can see on the front page, photograph indicates that we have all the Dens glass completed all the way around the building. We've also encapsulated the building in a plastic covering so we can heat the inside of the building as we move forward. And we're happy to say that all the openings in the building are closed up, so we're able to work in all areas of the building right now. Last week, when it was the polar vortex, it was pretty cold in there, but however, we were able to still do masonry work because we were able to maintain the heat inside the room, and the workers were very appreciative of that. We're approximately up to 33 people a day on the job site. Going back to pictures on page 5, you can see the rear of the building with the Den glass in picture number 1, and all the windows closed in. Moving over to number 2, you can actually see the apparatus bays are now all closed in as well, which allows them to get ready to pour concrete in that area as well. And picture 3 is just it's looking from the Woodward School at the building, where you can see it's enclosed, Den glass is installed, the site is being adjusted for continuous work going towards the Gulf Access Road. Picture 4 indicates the Dens glass installed, building encapsulated, but you could also see how the snow was impacting where they were working. Interior work, starting on photograph 5, you could see the underground slab being done, the membrane being applied around the columns inside the administrative area. Picture 6, also just a close-up of that area and the work that's being done for that work. Photograph 7 is the actual apparatus bay. You can see how it's cleaned out, being prepped for pouring. Photograph 8 is also the underground utilities that are being installed, and that will all be buried underneath the concrete and all the material that goes in that area as well. And then you go to picture 9, you can see the interior work that's being done, and this is very important. So there's been no stoppage of work inside the building, they're continuously going. And you can see the open space in picture 10, where the second floor framing is done. HVAC and plumbing work is continuing as we have warm temperatures inside the building. Picture 11 shows second floor well as well, with the plumbing and other metal stud framing going on the interior. And same thing when you're looking at picture 12, just gives you a bigger view of the open space that's being done, but also accounts for HVAC, plumbing, and electrical work that's being done on that job site right now. And on the last page, picture 13, 14, you can see the exterior trenching work being done for the drainage, as well as the primary electrical service coming to the building. This work is not yet complete, but it is very active in being done in that area. And pictures 15 and 16 can show you the masonry work that we were able to do. Even though the weather was very, very cold, we encapsulated the building, left enough space off the building so the guys could get around, walk around. These are some of the things that we need to finalize and get done, especially the stairs inside the building to get you all at proper access to the floors. Really don't want you to be climbing a ladder, but again, Saturday would be the best time of day to do it. We'll get permission from CTA to do it that way. And again, the only thing that they would request is that you wear boots, bless you, boots. We'll supply you with hard hats. There really should be nobody there. If there are, we'll work around where they're gonna be, but right now, we don't have the stairs ready for you to come, and outside right now is just a mud pit. And the time to do it, I guess it's getting dark now, around 5 o'clock, 5:30. You know, as it goes on, it'll get lighter and lighter, but again, the second we can get you proper access, safe access into the building, we'll button down that time for you. All right? So, any questions?
Mr. Rooney?
Back to page 3, schedule update.
Yep. Mike? I'll turn Mr. Woods towards you.
Back to page 3, schedule update.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us why the slab is 3 weeks behind and what what their explanation is and what their expectation is as to how they're gonna make that up.
We have discussed that at length with CTA. We brought this up a couple of weeks ago with regards to their schedule. It had a combination of doing with the weather before the building was completely encapsulated, the interior being a complete, it was just very, very muddy. We have discussed the issues with the floor and have been acknowledged by CTA that it is their responsibility, it's their issue. They're trying to take care of it right now. We have a follow-up meeting tomorrow to find out how you plan on making up the 3 weeks. As of right now, the concrete is set to be poured this week.
This week.
This week, yes. So we're hoping to find out really quickly how quick you're gonna make up that time.
And if it's poured this week, does that 3-week delay go away, or does it still exist?
No, what we've also asked them to do is at every monthly meeting that they present us with the pencil rec, they must provide an updated schedule to show how they're gonna make up this
Do
work.
you have any concern about the close date? As
I
you
always
sit
have a
here today?
concern.
You do?
I always do.
Yeah.
But it's something that you gotta work through throughout
Understood.
the process,
Yeah.
so.
Do
My
you- do you
concern right now is
expect-
getting this building done
Do you
on time.
expect further clarification after
Oh,
tomorrow's
absolutely, yes,
meeting?
yes. Yep. And we'll have that conversation with Jason tomorrow afternoon, after we meet with CTA tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Always my favorite calls.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any other questions on the monthly report? So, just to clarify that, just the contractor has admitted that it's on them, so that
Yes.
if we end up, let's just say, delayed 3 weeks in July,
Mhm.
right, we have the provision in our contract. If that ends up being the only thing that goes sideways, because I think even if it snowed from today forward to the end of March, we've already had a much better winter than anyone probably could have imagined, right? So, and we'll, yeah. So, you know, it seems like they've taken responsibility at least, and it's just on them at this point.
Right, and we've also asked them, you know, working with Context very closely, to say, okay, where's the more manpower? You guys have got to start ramping up everybody else, and those are some of the concerns we're already throwing out at them, going, okay, you also have 6 days a week to work. So, I mean, when they left today, the concrete contractor was still there. So, prepping for the concrete pour. The masons are working, and now it's just a matter of time before they start ramping up their crews as well. So, it is a very hot topic every Tuesday that we meet, and it goes throughout the days of the week when we talk to their principal and we talk to their project managers.
Sounds good. With that, I will move on to proposed change orders from the general contractor. So you're going to note we have 2 procurement items tonight. Anything that came through CTA will be covered in this agenda item, and then anything the town's buying directly will be in our next agenda item. So Jeff, I thought the best way to do this would be to go through the 4 PCOs, and then we'll come back to the epoxy, because we don't have an official change order in front of us for that, but we have a number and details.
Right. Okay, so, you should have the change order, PCO, proposed change order letter in front of you. I'm just gonna go through them in order. The first one is for, the LED signage, which we own 2 signs at Coralville Road. We own the signs, we didn't have a specification that specified how those signs were to operate. So the contractor assumed they would be blinking 24 hours a day, which is of course not what we intended. We worked carefully with them and a vendor to define exactly the pieces we needed. If you remember, this was discussed, I think, 3 or 4 meetings ago. We had talked about a number being tens of thousands of dollars, but the total change to the contract is only, it's still a number, but it's $7,854 for the transceivers, then the key fobs, which are actually relatively expensive, for the fire and police vehicles are gonna be setting it off. The intention is those transceivers, those key fobs would go in the vehicles for wireless transmitters. But this would provide the allowance so that it will fire off the warning signs when emergency vehicles are exiting, and only when they choose to.
And how does it know?
How does
Like-
it know?
Is it going to require a manual?
Yes.
So an officer or a firefighter actually have to remember to push the button.
Well, dispatch can also do it as well.
Okay.
So the idea is that I think it's up to them to figure out what their protocol is going to be, but, you know, there's various ways that it can be triggered so that it's working.
Okay.
But the idea is that, you know, it doesn't always have to be triggered if you don't need it.
There's a lot that goes into the mindset of someone that's responding to an emergency. Chiefs, are you okay with that approach?
I'll defer. Police cruisers can usually maneuver quite well, so.
Right now, we're manipulating the garage doors on our own. It's not handled by dispatch, so we do have a garage door opener. So the firefighters are used to doing that as they're exiting the building, so. And if we have capability in dispatch for them to do that, we can prompt them to turn on the sign when we're leaving the
Okay.
facility.
Mr. Rooney?
So help me out here. Again, I always go back to this issue. The two signs were in the bid drawings, but the technical specifications were not.
Correct.
What does that mean and why did that happen?
So the drawing showed pictures of the signs with
Right.
notes locating them there. And the specification that was supposed to go along with it just didn't get included.
When
We
you
had
say
the
was
spec, but
supposed
it
to,
just
wh-
didn't
wh-
get
who-
included.
Who was responsible for
That was our
making-
specification,
That was your specification?
correct, yeah.
You good?
Yep.
And these signs conform with what planning board
These are
required us to do?
required, under planning board, yep.
No, but
They
what we're
conform to
set,
their
what,
requirements.
I don't wanna call, maybe using the word settling right now is not the right word, but what we are approving now
Is what the intent was.
is what the intent always was.
From the beginning, was always the intent. This is exactly what we intended.
Okay. All right, anything else down there? Good?
No, my mother taught me if I can't say anything nice, say nothing at all.
Okay. Any other questions on LED signs? All right, next PCO.
In the detention area, we had door closers that were not required. They were in the documents, they were not required. And there was, at the same time, an additional need for electronic hardware at the storage closet, and which was not previously required for electronic hardware. So there was a net credit available of $1,954.16.
Any
This
questions on that?
will be tied to a later one coming up.
So, do you want to go over that 173, I assume?
Yeah, it's 73. This is for electronic keying for the hardware at the detention storage closet, the same closet I just mentioned. We didn't provide power for it. This is for that power requirement. And the card reader will come out of the security budget. It's a separate item. It's not under the contractor. So this is for the additional cost for the electrical. It's $1,486.77. So, you know, if you add the two together, there's still a net credit for the change that was requested.
Any questions on those collectively together? All right, 72?
In the back of the building, where the second floor is over top of the roof, the flat roof below, there's a couple of areas where steel that supports brickwork, there's a lintel that supports the brick that's hanging above the roof, turns a corner, and the structural drawing showed that lintel stopping at the corner and not turning. There's about, 2 feet or so that needed structural support there. That was not included on the structural drawings. It was also not noticed by the contractor until the mason had begun their work. So the steel contractor had left the site, with their tools. And even though this, if it had been seen by the contractor, at the time the steel contractor was on site, it would have been a cost add for the steelwork itself, but because we wouldn't have to have paid the mobilization cost, would have been significantly lower than this. So this includes bringing the steelworker back to install these additional pieces of structure, which is a total cost of $4,844.24.
How did that one happen? That seems like a pretty big boo-boo that, we forgot to put steel there.
Well,
Because this week alone, we're up to another $14,225 worth of, wasn't in the drawings.
sure,
It,
yeah.
it seems to be a trend. I'm starting to see why we started out with a 10% contingency, because there's always these things, we forgot to put them in.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to.
Understood. No, I
to
get you,
dump on
and
you, but
and if
come
I were in
on.
your seat, I'd have the same
Judge
question.
says, do your job.
And I don't think I've made any secret of the fact that we don't claim to have prepared a perfect set of drawings. I don't think there's an architect that would claim that. And there's always going to be a certain amount of what's called errors and omissions. Basically, it didn't make it on the drawings, not for a lack of knowing that it should have been there, just for, an omission, an oversight, didn't make it in. And obviously, if we had
A
found
checks
it,
and
we
balances,
would've-
somebody should have looked that over with you guys too. Should that have been caught by you, that we didn't have steel?
Technically, there should have been a review done. I won't take the fifth and say I wasn't a part of the beginning,
No,
but
no,
yes.
but
it
you see
usually
what I'm
is
saying?
done.
Somebody, I thought we hired people to have checks and balances to get these
Well,
things looked
Vertex
at.
did do a review, an engineering review of the drawings before they went out to bid.
Can you tell me what percentage is the remobilization versus the cost of the material?
I'd have to go through the back. 4,000? Remobilization is 4,000.
The remobilization is 4,000.
Yeah. Yeah, and there, to be honest with you, we do expect to partner with the contractors on the project as well. And to date, we haven't had much luck in getting them to do a lot of the, pre-planning of the work. So many of these, this particular change order, not trying to shift the blame here, but it would have been helpful if we had known about it earlier. But that happens in construction. And it also happens that we make mistakes. So I'm not going to say that it wasn't our mistake. It was definitely our mistake, and that's why, part of the reason why we have the contingency going in. And I understand the frustration. It's going to happen again. I don't want to sit here and tell you that, there's not going to be another one. The idea is to make them go away make them small as possible.
And I know Mr. Wood appreciates this as well. At some point, the number of hoops may be required for you to notify your error and omission coverage that, listen, you know what, we're here again. So is there
Well,
any, is there any,
John, I don't want to interrupt you, but we've covered this in other meetings.
Yep.
We need to continue the project, and we need to keep it moving. We've set up a process with Vertex to track each of these, so I think this one goes in that bucket.
all right,
And Vertex is gonna come back at a future meeting with a proposal that will be vetted by myself and Mark beforehand, that this is what we think errors and omissions were. Obviously, we'll socialize it with the folks that we think may have had the errors and omissions. I think it's really important that we know that there's a 3-week delay on the concrete, for example, right? I think this team is all together, right? Even though we pay them, right? We need to make sure that this project continues to proceed. It's gonna cost us a lot more if we get stuck in some of this. I think what we all need to do is take copious notes. Obviously, our minutes are very well reflective of this. And when this conversation comes back up in a few months, every committee member will be able to, decide where they stand on some of these things in terms of where we stand financially on the project. But we clearly have to do it. So I think sitting here tonight and going through this over, right, and I appreciate, Jeff, your honesty in terms of that there may be others, but I think we're not aware of any major ones tonight, correct? And I think the volume has come down.
Yes.
So, while I wish there was none too, and I obviously get to usually know about some of these in advance, and have a lot of usually Kevin calls me when the number's about like 10 times the size of what you actually see come through on the piece of paper. So just understand that I think we've put together a very transparent process for the community, and we should continue to track these. And you may feel very strongly on this one. I may have felt very strongly on some 2 meetings ago. I think we just all need to individually keep track of what was important to us, what really, yeah. So that's why Mr. Lyons' minutes, these meetings are taped, right? And Kevin has been tracking it as well, I can assure you of that. I think we have kind of a triangulated approach to kind of approach this when we get a little further in the project. Sorry, I didn't,
No, and I hope you understand that the reason we ask these questions is that we're stewards of the residents' money, and it's important that we ask the questions.
Sure, I totally get it. I do think that there's a sort of a reasonableness point, and that's what you're
Agreed.
trying to get at.
Exactly.
And I understand that as well. I think from our perspective, we also attempt to shoot for that, being below that point of, things getting out of hand. I don't think we're at that point yet, and, obviously, Jason's gonna have a process to work through this, and I'm not quite sure exactly how that's gonna take place. We haven't talked about it yet, but, you should also know there's, because they are errors and omissions, there's a significant amount of work that we put in. Obviously, there's no intention of ever trying to charge the town for that. We have to do it as part of our contract to fix, design-wise, the mistakes. We have to come up with free design work to do whatever is necessary to give the contractor direction, sketches. I have my engineers work on things. All that has to happen. It's part of the process. And as was mentioned, there's also a significant amount of negotiation that goes into these to make sure that as little amount of money has to come out of the project cost to pay for anything that happens, which is why I said earlier, we would appreciate a stronger relationship with the contractor so that we could catch things earlier. I'd rather have caught the, lintel issue before I had to pay $4,000 for the steel guy to come back. But that hasn't happened yet. I think Kevin, it's part of mine and Kevin's goal is to try to raise that continuously with the contractor to make sure that they are pre-planning their work so that we can catch any issues ahead of time and try to solve them in a way that maybe doesn't cost anything.
Mike.
Real quick, where's your threshold in change orders or errors and omissions?
We're done with this topic.
All right.
I'm moving on. So we need to call a vote on
Can I,
these.
one more comment, not about that?
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I heard right. When I saw it, I thought, boy, this really is going down as far as the net change orders. So at this point, because you usually have a look in your face that there's something coming that we don't know about yet, at this point.
That's why I just asked them.
Okay, at this point.
These signs started, they told me a 6-figure number on the $7,000 signs about 2 months ago.
Okay, but at this point, we don't know of anything else tonight that is not on a piece of paper that's coming?
We have things in negotiation.
There are things, but nothing that is me calling him going, oh my God, we have a major problem.
There's none of those?
No.
Okay, all right, good enough.
Knock on wood. None of those.
All right, so does anyone want to hold any of these 4 PCOs that were presented to us tonight? Okay, so then I will move that we accept the 4 PCOs as presented in the packet. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wood. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. So now we're going to move on to the epoxy flooring. So there's not an official change order behind this. Remember, this was on change order 6 last time. We had extensive conversation. The price after credit has now come down about $10,000. We're now at $80,000. But there's a really important question that I don't know the answer to, is does this impact project timeline if we are to accept this change order tonight?
He was supposed to get back to us today. He did not do that.
Okay,
That will be one of the first topics of discussion tomorrow morning.
so how is our committee supposed to make an educated vote on the decision?
When we started to approach all these open items that we wanted to resolve tonight, the idea was everything would be ready for you last Thursday. Unfortunately, that has not been the case, and most importantly with the epoxy flooring. It has gone back and forth between CTA and this side, and unfortunately, I would take that item right now and hold it until I have the final answer for you.
But,
I would love to approve it just to say, okay, we're moving
well, I don't want to
forward.
ram it through, but I guess what I'm trying to understand is you're going to come to me tomorrow morning and say it does or doesn't have a project
Yes.
impact. Then this committee has to then repost a meeting and formally, that's the whole reason we had the meeting
Why wouldn't you
tonight.
vote subject to, at least vote to
All right,
approve it?
well, no, I think we should do definitely if it has no timeline impact. I think the more loaded conversation is if it does have a timeline impact,
Then what?
what do we do? So, Mr. Rooney,
if the floor hasn't been poured yet, and they're 3 weeks behind, then I can't envision in my mind how it could have a project impact delay.
Well, what we did,
Help me out there?
yeah, what we don't know is how much use do they need once the floor is poured? In other words, are they gonna be on that floor every day for the rest of the job so that there is no time available for the epoxy crews to come in and spread the epoxy down? It's approximately a 1 week,
Or
1 week
takes a week.
plus or minus, that you can't be on the floor for. So basically what we're asking the CTA, is there not 1 week within your entire rest of the project that you can just not be on the floor?
So worst case scenario, we're looking at a 1 week delay.
Potentially,
In addition,
yeah.
Potentially,
worst
yes.
case.
Yeah.
1 week.
That's my opinion.
So let's talk about the merits of it, then we'll talk about scheduling. So the price is now 80,000. There are some people that were for this at the last meeting. There's some people that needed some more time. So those that needed more time to make a decision one way or another, are there any questions you have for Kevin or Jeff?
I don't have any questions. I am actually for the floor. I just figured if we could wait on making a decision and see what other change orders we might have. I think that was pretty much my concern for waiting. So I think it's a really good product and that it should definitely be installed in the station. And that's my vote.
I was hesitant. I did a little looking into it, and it seems to be that everyone who's used it really likes it, and they find that it stays clean, and they're able to. It stands up to wear. So I guess that as much as I hesitate to spend more money, it looks like if it's going to reduce maintenance and work better in the long term, then I think we need to think long term.
I was hesitant, and I agree. It extends the life of the flooring as well.
I think candidly, the credit came in a little higher than, and I was told 0 for about 2 weeks, and I was told like $1,000 for a week and a half, and then all of a sudden it was 10,000 on Fridays, so consider that
What happens if we wait 2 more days?
I don't know. All right, does anyone want to discuss this any further? So I'm gonna make a motion based on no schedule impact, then we'll talk about what 7 days may or may not mean. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, so I'll move that we accept the epoxy floor price of 80,000 for purposes of a forthcoming change order. Is that, there a second? Assuming no schedule delay. Seconded by Mr. Wood. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Kelly, I didn't see your hand. Are you? All right. All right, that part. All right, so that's unanimous. So then, 7 days. I want a secondary motion. Do we still support it, or do we want to bring it back for further conversation?
Is that 7 days on top of the 3 weeks, so a 4-week delay?
No, I'm viewing this as 7 working days on top of July 10th.
You'd be paying the contractor for 7 days prorated for their general conditions costs.
It's gonna be more than 80,000 at that point too, right?
What, the time, total time?
Well-
Well, yeah, would that be added to the 80?
Do you know about how much?
Okay, so what is 7 days general conditions?
Do you know what
Prorated.
their-
Plus
what their
we're
burn rate
paying
is?
Vertex, and I'm sure Context is gonna send us a bill for that one, because
For
that's
1
not
week?
their, that's, well, it's not your change, so.
Yeah.
I won't send you a bill for a week.
I won't send you a bill.
No, a 1 week change, don't
Okay,
worry about
that's
it.
in the minutes, please.
I assume you have a certain amount of persuasive ability to convince the contractor the importance of getting this job done on time, number one. And number two, if we're going with epoxy flooring, they can also get it done on time. Is that correct?
I don't see a big reason why it should be a problem, but I also know this contractor has been more challenging on schedule items, so I don't also want to necessarily gift him a reason to say there's an extra delay. But that being said, it's a week, and I can't imagine they couldn't find a week where their guys are off the floor. I mean, once they get all the overhead in, pretty much sits there until they're ready. I mean, that's been my experience, Kevin.
No, I agree. The difficult part of this is how he's going to schedule all the hangers and everything up in the ceiling in order to get the lifts off the floor.
Yeah, I mean, the other, that's a good point. They often use that, basically, it's a giant storage facility.
Sure.
So they put everything that needs to be stored in the building on the floor for the remainder of the job. So basically, you gotta tell them, you gotta clear all that stuff out. So typically, our experience has been, it either goes down very quickly after the slab is poured, and you have to have a particular product to do that, which I think ours is, or it goes on towards the end, the very end.
Why wouldn't you do it contemporaneous with the pouring of the slab?
Slab has to cure for a little bit
Yeah,
of
for a little
time.
bit, but the floor is clear at that point.
Yeah,
The biggest issue would then become potential damage of somebody dropping a
Well,
pipe.
can you put some sort of
You could put down plywood, you could put
Yeah.
that down, but my experience before doing these, you want nobody on top of that floor.
yeah.
Somebody could just
So
by
you wanna
accident,
do it at the end of the
I would
project.
highly recommend that this would be the last thing you would do on this job.
Yeah, which gives more credence to the fact that there certainly shouldn't be a reason at the end of the project where there's not storing very many
Right.
things, that they shouldn't have that availability.
Well, we have a holiday week that we agreed to give them a few extra days. So even that week, right, you've got a lot of, I'll call it drying time in there, that people will not even be working.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest direction we need to give them right now is, if we're gonna do the epoxy floor, in order to get these credits, they're not gonna finish it the same way, and they're not gonna put the sealer hardener on
Right,
the
which is a
slab.
tonight decision.
Yeah.
Like even Friday, like, I can't post another meeting until Friday morning at this, Thursday morning at this point. So that might be too late. Am I thinking about this the right way? If concrete shows up tomorrow,
We're not putting the epoxy floor down.
I'm talking about the credits,
The credits, yeah.
which is $10,000.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be at right at
Yeah, I
the
guess,
threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd be finishing the slab, depending on if they actually start to pour it when they say they're going to, yeah, it'd be too late.
Okay, so my suggestion, do you have something? Go
That
ahead.
extra week, would that pretty much be that $10,000 credit, roughly? If they had to do it prorate?
I don't know what their burn rate is on the, on the
Roughly, I'm
general
just
conditions.
guesstimate.
What do you think it is?
I think so.
$10,000 for a week? Might even be a little bit more than that.
So here's my suggestion. We've approved the epoxy flooring tonight for $80,000 with no schedule change.
And if he comes back tomorrow and tells us there's a schedule change, that's it, it's off.
Negotiate.
We can do
There's
that.
gotta be a way. Got 6
There's
months.
always a way.
Yeah. And then if there really is a dire issue that we need to figure out, well, you've got a holiday in there.
One of the concerns, tell me if this enters into the equation, is that
Mike, John.
they're already 3 weeks behind. If we all say, yeah, we want to go with the epoxy, they see this as an opportunity, perhaps, to maintain that buffer of being the 3 weeks.
Right now, the 3 weeks is on him.
Right.
He's got to figure out how he's going
Right.
to come back to July 10th. However, you make a good point. It's our job to push him so there is no continuous delay, another delay coming through.
Right.
I'm not saying here tonight that there won't be a delay with another change order. Previously, we weren't seeing days added to PCOs. Now, I feel we're going to start seeing days added to these PCOs.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be the fight, to say, okay, is this realistic? Or is this just him trying to pad his dates?
Right.
So he doesn't run into that problem, and we've had good conversation, but I think the team that we have understands this more than he does,
Okay.
so.
And we should all keep in mind that these calendar days are not simply just cumulative days. They are critical path days. So the work that has to be done in order to meet the finish date, the critical path in the entire scope of the project, has to be affected by whatever change we're talking about. So when they add 1 or 2 days for something, now it's Kevin and my team's job to go in and actually figure out or push back, as I don't think that day actually affects the critical path. You know, it might take that plumber an extra day to do it, but you're not staying on site 1 extra day.
But this is a critical
So,
path
but
issue, though.
That goes back to my earlier point about, I find it very difficult that they couldn't find a week in the entire project schedule that would push it out one more week for them to just get in there and do the work, to
I don't think
rearrange a
this
few
is a critical
tasks.
path. I mean, this is not critical path. This should be concurrent, right?
Well, potentially, and it depends on how they've arranged their schedule for the remainder of the job, which is why Kevin was waiting for them to comment. Because really, those are the folks that need to tell us how it's gonna impact. But my opinion is this is not gonna affect the critical path.
All right, so we're just guessing now, so we just gotta
Right.
wait and
Yeah.
see.
All right, so I don't see, unless anyone, I think we've made our motion. I think it's very clear. I'm around tomorrow if we need to talk to
Oh,
CTA.
No problem.
All right, so we're gonna move on to review and approval of items requiring procurement outside of general contractor. We've had a preview on some of these in the past, but we'll start with the dispatch equipment, Kevin.
Right, so with the dispatch equipment, we're moving over the dispatch from the current location, which is at the police station, and putting it inside the new headquarters. We've gone back and forth. We had 3 actual quotes previously. We had a line item holding a sum of money around $68,000 previously. When we were able to talk with the chiefs to combine what we wanted, we were able to reduce the number of consoles that were originally proposed as 4 down to 2. The game plan would be to have one of the 2 existing consoles that are in use right now at the current police station brought over as well, not to the extent that the new ones would be put in, but you have to make a seamless transfer over. You can't have at all the police station down. You have to have them one up, ready to go, and flick the switch, they seamlessly go right over. So we're adding a 3rd console that really, I guess, really isn't an operational console. It's there for future use if we need it. But we were able to get Evans down to $58,000 for all the equipment going into that room from the original. He was up around over $90,000. We brought him down minus the 2 consoles, and we even reduced him even a little bit further, down to $58,000. And I do believe, in talking with both chiefs, who, thank you very much for your help, we might be able to even reduce that by a couple $1,000s more. Because there's furniture equipment that has to be procured in that room that we believe right now another contractor's carrying. So we might have a credit there, and depending on who the person is carrying, if it's CTA, I would rather take it away from him, because then I'm not being charged overhead and profit, whereas if I go with the other gentleman, he's not charging that. So we have the list of all the equipment. I could provide that for you. We're actually meeting with Scott tomorrow, along with all the other vendors that are gonna be inside the dispatch center. This is a lot of moving pieces and a lot of pieces to that puzzle, so we're gonna meet with everybody tomorrow. So all the i's are dotted and the t's are crossed, but right now we're talking and asking for, because it's over a 14-week lead time to get this equipment, that we wanna move forward with the 2 consoles provided by Evans, as discussed with the chiefs and some of the members of the committee.
So to be clear, you're asking for $54,000 and $54,010
Yes,
tonight.
I always
And it may,
go
and
up.
that's your ceiling, not your,
Ceiling is absolutely 58. 54 should be the number that we're looking at, but I never want to come back to you guys and say, oh, it was a couple $100s off. So I always go a little high.
So the
Do you want
58 is 2
54?
new ones?
2 brand-new ones. The 54
So we
is
end up with
actually-
3. We're gonna bring 1 over.
Yep, at no
So we're
cost.
gonna have 3.
Yep.
We currently have 1.
Currently have 2.
We currently have 2, so we're gonna end up with 1 more. And does the 58 include moving the current one down?
He said he would move it for us.
So you're asking for 58, not the 54,
Tonight, I'm asking for 58, knowing that I'm coming in lower than that.
so
I
what does the
just don't
58 tie to?
58 tied everything together, and just being a conservative person, I just went a little bit higher. I don't want to come too low and then say I made a mistake.
All
That's
right.
all.
But the document in our packet says 54, okay?
54 is fine with me. That's where we are.
Well, if you need 58, I just want to know
I
what the
need
extra 4
58.
is.
I love 58, but I don't need it.
All right.
I think you can get them to go lower.
Easy.
It sounds like 50. All right,
Can I
let
just
me-
ask one more question? If
Yeah.
we've got 2 right now, why do we need 3?
We weren't going to take any of them. We were just going to go with the 2.
Okay?
But the future game plan was the room is sized to have 3. So when we were discussing with the chiefs, that equipment's just going to be destroyed, not used ever again, bring the table over. That's all I need is a table for future use. If something does go down, we're able to seamlessly go right over to the other console.
But do we use, I mean, this is my ignorance. I don't understand how it all works. So do you use more than one at a time?
Oh, yes, there's 2 in operation.
Yeah?
Emergency, yeah.
So we're going to have an extra one when we do this, right? So why didn't we consider buying one new one and bringing the other one down?
As far as what
I know there's room for 3.
Chief Paulus?
You were easily going over 2 to 2.
It's been a while, but we've gone over this. The current equipment that we have, it'll be about 6.5 years old by the time we move in. It'll be, end of life is 10 years, but we had this discussion that although it was great that they redid it with mitigation money, they kind of went with the cheapest option there was on the equipment. And especially the furniture and the consoles that we have set up, that was made custom to fit the room that we have now, not the room that we're moving into. So we're just hoping to retrofit that we have, the equipment that we have for that 3rd station. Why let it go to waste?
But it's gonna look like it was jammed in there and not, it obviously won't look consistent with the other 2 desks.
No, the design will be different, but I mean, that's something that we'll have to look at as how it'll best set up and how it'll look. But the main 2 consoles right at the front by the window that the public's going to see, that'll all be brand new in uniform to, custom fit for the room.
So that's the 2 you'll use mainly. You'll have the 3rd one there just as a backup?
Oh, yes, yeah, that'll just be as a backup.
So I just have to keep asking my ignorant questions. So do you have 2 dispatchers working side by side, is what you're saying?
At times we do. We use grant money right now to fund a 2nd dispatcher at times. When we do training, which is extensive, we have that going on right now. We're training 2 part-time dispatchers. We have 2 people there in an emergency EOC situation. We have 2. And at times, some of the storms that we have, we will be utilizing, the 3rd dispatch position.
Okay.
I think in future growth too, most towns, you end up having at peak times 2 dispatchers working. But that already occurs at various times now.
Any further questions on dispatch? All right, so I will move that we approve funding for dispatch equipment for an amount not to exceed $54,011. Round it up for you.
But just to be clear, the 58 included bringing that dispatch.
Mike, your mic.
The 58,000 at max, I like the 54 number. That included bringing the dispatch piece over there and setting it up over there.
The 54 includes that, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Okay.
54 included that as well. I
Yep.
thought that it did
Don't
not.
get
That was
against
an
yourself,
additional,
He's
okay.
really bringing it over at no charge.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is just mainly for the equipment and the 2 consoles that he's providing all the stuff to it. The other console was just, all right, should we go out and buy a table? And it was sitting right there, and we spoke to him, he goes, yeah, absolutely, I was getting rid of it anyway. I was like, oh, well, then we'll take it,
Okay.
that's all.
I didn't realize that this included that, though. So,
Yeah.
okay. I just wanted,
Yep.
like you said, I didn't want you having to come back.
No, I never
Okay.
want to come back.
So I need a
No,
second.
no offense, I mean, I like you guys.
Second.
All right, seconded by Mr. Officers. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. Gear lockers.
This item for the station is approximately just over $34,000 to provide gear lockers for the turnout gear of the fire department. This item was not in the documents. However, we got the information from CTA as well as a proposal from Dunnigan, who was another vendor. And CTA number was $34,000 with some change. You have it in your packet. But that's what we're looking for now, so we can at least release them to purchase this equipment so it gets on its way to the station.
Mr. Rooney?
What's the difference between the 32,000 some odd number and the 28,000 quote from Northern Corp?
It's materials versus, I think you got some labor, right?
Yeah. So the price that we ended up getting from CTA includes all the labor to install.
So the Northern Corp is just the product.
No, it says price includes installation,
They're-
right?
they're-
That's what I'm
yeah.
not figuring out, though. It says price includes installation.
On Northern's.
Guys, your mic.
It's on. Sorry.
Right. Just looking at this document, it looks like it's 28,000 for the purchase, then there's something about power bars and the general labor and cleanup.
Yes.
Are you seeing that?
Yeah, but then it says price includes installation.
It doesn't include the electrical power bar that was going on.
Right, and it doesn't include the,
The power bar is what powers up the radios, flashlights, everything else that's going
There's
associated with that
chargers in
equipment.
each gear rack, essentially.
Okay, they have a line, there's a line item of 475 for that, correct? On the Northern?
Yep, and then there's an additional over $2,000 for CTA sub down below. That's really. What's the,
I don't see
there's
it.
also a markup, right? The general
then
contractor's
there's some
markup.
markup on some of the labor, because they have to sub it out for the electrical.
In my packet, there's a page that has this, oh, that's the page, I think, John, on your left, yes? That has it spelled out.
It says big PCO number 063-R1 in the top right.
This is number two.
Go ahead, chief.
Oh, okay. So.
If I can help you out a little bit, Jason.
Then the add-on that comes up. It's still.
Back when you guys approved the FF&E budget, and this is going back a few months, I believe you approved $185,000 for WB Mason, and then an additional 80-some-odd thousand for Dunnigan for lockers and things like that. In that, we did not include, but we did get a quote for the gear grid lockers, because at the time it was going to go in the bid, which came out to be roughly the $34,000 that you're looking at right now. Chris Shanahan's done a great job of going through the furniture thing. We just did another review with WB and Dunnigan to make sure our price quotes and everything were on par. And I haven't really had a good discussion with Kevin about it, but it looks like right now, with a rebid or looking at the furniture from WB, we could see a reduction of about 15% off of that 185. So I think with the approval of this PCO, it will still fall within what the original FF&E budget was for, that we were, I think, what, $3,000 under when we did the lockers and the furniture, so doing a little bit more of pencil sharpening and homework on the furniture side, I think we can get that number down within and still have those lockers. So I don't know if that'll help out with your decision here tonight.
So that number's 400,000 in total, right? Your budget?
No, that was 357, yeah,
That's your budget, 357?
for total for the FF&E, correct.
Okay, so with the 34 and with the WB Mason sharpening the pencil,
Yep,
you think you can get everything in, still under 357?
yep.
I mean, I think that's awesome, but I think we also have to have a place for the firefighters to put their gear. I don't know that we have a, this is just, I think it's something we've always known about, it's just a matter of where it goes. And now you've gotten two quotes, and ironically, CTA is cheaper,
Yes.
which I don't think anyone expected. I guess my only question is the wall-mounted versus the mobile units. The mobile units just due to space requirements?
Yeah, so the entire plan from the design, from the beginning, was to have these essentially peninsular island-type units in the middle of the gear.
The way they are now.
The way they are, yeah, we're not changing that. It was just, that was the way it always was. There was no wall separating the two sides of the locker room for those to mount on. We've done it different ways, but that's usually how we do the middle of the locker room, the gear locker room, which, you know, for electrical, you'll see whips coming down from the ceiling to power those lockers. But it's a gear room, so it's not an aesthetic thing.
In the 42 lockers, is there a magic to how much space those take, or do we actually get to pick that we got 42?
guess I'm not sure, what is your question?
Square foot of the room.
Oh,
We
yeah,
measured it
no,
all
we,
out to
we,
fit
yeah,
all
we
the-
planned,
but
we
all right.
planned for these lockers essentially.
Okay, but the space needs calls for in 35 years that we're only gonna have 35 firefighters.
Mhm.
So, just a question, why we need the extra 7? If 35 years from now, we're saying we're not gonna have more than 35 firefighters in the community.
Jason, you're taxing my memory. I
don't know,
I
Chief,
don't
I don't
recall.
know
So
when-
that was full-time staff, but it wasn't considering any, if we continued to have call,
Right, it had 0
Firefighter.
call. If I went back to the,
yeah.
Yeah, I just don't remember exactly how we got to the number, and I'm sure there's a very good reason, but
Okay.
I just don't know it off the top of my head.
any other questions on this? All right, I will move that we accept CTA PCO 063-R1 as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wood. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. Next item is gym equipment. Kevin did not furnish any details on this, but maybe, Kevin, if you could walk, so I'm not expecting any sort of vote tonight, but just walk through what discussions you're having so that the committee can weigh in on where we want this to go.
So when I was involved with this project so far, the gym equipment was all coming over from the PD side, that would still house the PD. Fire department requested that they have equipment for their firefighters as well. So in discussions with both chiefs, we looked at the needs coming across to the new fire station and made a determination that some of the equipment that they really wanted all had to do with cardio over some of the priorities of other ones. So we went with the cardio priority and looked at treadmills, elliptical bikes, elliptical machines, punching bags, other things that would be able to provide them with state-of-the-art equipment to use to keep up physical health. And the list was pretty extensive that we were looking at, so in talking with the chiefs, we cut it down the best way we could for tonight to present what equipment we'd like to see. So we gave a number of approximately, after going over the numbers and reviewing it with the supplier, of $14,000 right now to provide the cardio equipment that the fire department would need day one of the project. The hope is that as the project goes on and we make more cost savings throughout the project, we might be able to purchase additional equipment that they hope to have. But right now, in order to open the station, you get this equipment, this is what you absolutely need. So there's always that chance that it might be a couple $100 more for other types of equipment. It's not in the thousands. But right now, for tonight, and then talking with the chiefs, we're looking to have the committee approve our purchasing of weight equipment that costs no more than $14,000.
Weight or cardio?
Sorry, cardio. As you can see, I don't really use it. but-
So, Kevin, you mentioned fire.
Yes,
So is police because they already have all their
Yes.
equipment?
yes.
And Chief, there's nothing,
Oh, there's things that,
hang on, Chief Paulus is shaking his head.
Whatever equipment that will go in there, both departments will use it. Very recently, the Police Association did a total remake of the gym, which is in the police side, and they put up about $20,000, which was very generous of them. Just in looking, things that we're short on would be cardio equipment, especially if two departments are gonna be using it. And the few items that are down there are getting to the end of life. They're quite old. So we had put together a committee, and they had a lot of wants. I got together with the fire chief, and we both agreed that cardio would be the priority. So that's how we're coming to these items. But that $20,000 worth of weight equipment that's coming over with us, and what Kevin's talking about is what we agreed to meet really the minimum needs for both departments to be using that room as far as cardio equipment.
So the 14,000 is for police and fire, not
Correct.
just fire? Okay. Well, that's important.
There's
because-
just one gym, right?
Yeah, but I was confused by the reference to just fire.
this is on top of the
Yeah.
police equipment.
So, okay, I guess, what's the urgency with doing it tonight?
Just being allowed to order the equipment.
So,
I don't want to be backed up all the way to the end. I mean,
but we don't need this day one,
No.
right? And
we'll have everything,
any equipment company will gladly bring it in at any point in time, right?
you know, I won't be ready for it until,
You have the concrete poured.
Yeah.
that'll be a problem.
Elevator's gotta be.
No, I wouldn't, I don't think we'd be ready for it anyway until, you know, we'd want to open up the station, have everything finished, painting, everything else, and then this would be one of the last things to put in there.
The only thing I would say is that I think making sure that the folks selecting the equipment have some semblance of certainty that the fitness direction is the right way to go, so that we can lay out electrical and TV locations for these components, so that when the electrician wires everything up, everything's in the right spot, no matter when you buy it.
TV location?
I'm just, who knows? I'm sure there's TV.
Coax is
Jacks.
great, yeah.
Yeah.
Jacks are great.
I think when we did go over it, we had agreed that we went upstairs with the electrical, that it would be against the far wall, east side, and then we were gonna put the electrical there. That's where the cardio equipment
Right.
would,
Yeah, and
would go.
that's my point, is that I think we have this understanding of what's coming, and I
Mhm.
just don't wanna get, you know, if there's a decision to go a different direction, I don't wanna not have what you need in the built environment. So
So-
that's not a big deal, but.
All right, so I'll share my view and then, so there is nothing budgeted for this. And I've been around a while on this committee and the prior committee. We had always been told that there was not gonna be any funding for gym equipment from the town. So, kudos to the chiefs that at least gave me a heads up that there were some requests coming. I'm not saying I'm sticking with that opinion, I'm just making it abundantly clear to the committee that there is not a budgeted line item for these items. My personal view is I don't feel like this is a move-in day one, when we've handed over the keys to a $20 million facility, hopefully less. It's something that we can evolve into over time. I get that this budget will go away at some point in time, but our goal is to turn back. I think there has to be a coordinated approach, which I'd recommend that the unions or the associations, whatever the right group are, come and actually present what, you know, they might be doing to kind of help. I think the police chief has articulated what the police department has done over years, but, you know, just articulate that even more, right? I think the number is pretty substantial, because I think if I were on the outside looking into this committee and just rubber stamping something like this, I think the optics are really bad.
Can Mr. Rooney and I add something here from advisory that might help this discussion? So I agree with everything you said.
Well, can I just finish one more thing? I think there's also grant funding opportunities for these sorts of items. I think there's also corporations in many, it might not even be in this town, that are oftentimes looking to dispose of perfectly good equipment because they just have a plan that they go through. So I just think it needs a more holistic view before we bring this forward and just rubber stamp something. I think 14,000 randomly doesn't, without a document or a piece of paper behind it or a formal presentation, just, I know it's a bit small in the grand scheme of things, but it just doesn't feel right to be approved tonight, so.
There may even be some quite nice houses in town that have some pieces of equipment that are beautiful coat racks right now that people bought and never used, and might want to donate even.
Yeah.
So I agree with everything. There's lots of ways to approach this, but also with what Kevin said a minute ago, which is, well, we need 14 as the minimum, but, you know, down the road, if we got some other cost savings. I agree that this should not be funded with this budget. We've got other ways in this town to fund this that can do this without participating at all. So I don't think we should approve this at all, certainly right now.
Okay, so,
I have a little bit of a different view in that if we're building a gym, we probably ought to equip it. It doesn't mean that we have to have state-of-the-art and everything has to be perfect, but I think that if we're going to build a gym for the firefighters and the policemen to use, we ought to have it equipped. Otherwise, I don't know that we've done what we're supposed
I
to be
don't think
doing here.
anyone's arguing with
That's not the
equipping
argument,
it.
it's how to pay for it. And we're not arguing, absolutely we should have the equipment,
Well,
but there's different ways
okay.
to pay for it besides our budget.
I understand, but I think we have a responsibility to equip that facility. And I don't think we can just punt and say, go find a way to pay for it.
I don't think anyone said that. I
No, that's
think-
what I heard.
No,
But
we
let me
know-
rephr-
we
let me
already know some
rephrase it
ways
to be
it can
very
paid for.
clear then. Not enough diligence has been done on this.
I agree.
The committee can certainly help shepherd the process forward, but to approve a number tonight without a piece of paper or a formal plan, because I heard it's the tip of the iceberg. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that there's more coming behind it, and to hear the police chief say what has gone into it, right? That would be really nice to articulate that, you know, right, the departments have already like put their heads together, they've put some funding in. If they need help from people that know how to write grants or stuff like that, I'm all ears. I've said this 1,000 times. Kevin and I have talked about this every day for about 30 days now. I had really a lot of hesitation to put it on the agenda, but I felt like how to get it. So I think Vertex, fire chief, police chief, I'm happy to help facilitate anything. And I think that's our committee's job. I think where our committee's job ends, though, is taking a 30-year capital budget and funding these items.
I don't disagree that what's before us isn't completely thought out. And I also agree that I would not feel comfortable saying, here's the $14,000 when I don't know what it's funding or where it's going. But I still say that if we're building a gym, we have a responsibility to equip it. And I don't think it, certainly I agree that if there's grant money in that, and it's available, we should be going out and getting it. But I also say that if it turns out there's not grant money, I don't think we just leave an empty gym.
Okay, but do you think this is something that has to be resolved by July 10th of
No.
2019?
Well, I think it has to be resolved before this committee's done with its work.
Okay. We're gonna have some bills to approve in August.
Okay?
I'd just like to finish up. This has been a topic of discussion, and I think that you're correct, is we've never had a budget, so I asked for some direction on what the budget might be. And I agree with you, more work has to be done. I also agree with you that there is some expectation by the memberships of both departments that we are building a gym, so what will go into it. But I think we've kind of pushed this forward in the last several weeks, just recognizing that it hasn't been addressed yet. So I'm just happy that we're having the discussion.
Yeah. So what I will offer to do is I will work with the chiefs and Kevin to facilitate a plan. And I think you know where my goal is that we're gonna build them a great gym, but my goal is to bring back as minimal of a cost to this committee as possible, hopefully zero. Not gonna guarantee zero, right? If we can get it down to a number that's manageable and we know where we're at and we have no big aha moments, I'll entertain discussion on that. Is that palatable to
And
everyone?
Jason, I'd offer my services to meet with you and the chiefs, because I have some ideas as to how this can be funded separately from this here.
All right, so chiefs, we'll get with you and your representatives to bring this to fruition.
Thank you.
All right. Invoices. First one is Vertex. I don't know what John did to the billing system. I actually didn't have this on the agenda, and magically it popped in my inbox on Friday, so I added it. So a few things. There's a fees of $22,200, and then there's expenses of just north of $898. Kevin has credited a day that he worked on a Saturday to cover my concern from last time, which more than covers the concern. In addition, on this bill, Lori covered for Bill while he was out on leave for a few days. That has a higher cost than it should. Net, I can assure you, she's billing at a project manager rate.
I thought that was adjusted, but okay.
But
I'll take a look at it.
I did the math, like, we're actually, the town saved a little bit from Kevin's 1 day of credit, because he worked a full day on a Saturday. So I just wanted to point that out, that my concern from last month, that we conditioned the approval on the invoice, was taken care of. In addition, we cannot approve the expenses, they actually relate to the golf clubhouse, so I'm just gonna make a motion to approve the $22,200, and then Mark will take care of the rest. So I will move that we accept the Vertex invoices for the fees of $22,200 for the month of January. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Berry. Any discussion or questions?
On the reimbursables, Kevin, these are out of pocket
Yeah.
expenses from you,
Yes,
and they related to the clubhouse?
yes, we had to do items for the building inspector, and the cheapest way of doing it was, I bought it, we installed it. I didn't want to get CTA involved.
No, he's gonna get paid. He just has to come out of the golf
I
clubhouse.
just wanna make sure he's gonna get paid out of the golf clubhouse.
Well, I guess his employer should make sure he gets paid, but then we have to make sure his employer gets paid.
I'm good. I'm good. We're good.
All right. Any other questions or discussions? All right. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. Next one is other vendor invoices per Vertex recommendation. Just context is one bill for $31,750 for the month of January. Any questions? I'll move that we accept the Vertex recommendation to pay Context for the month of January for the total of $31,750. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Berry. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. Last invoice is going to be for CTA. We are approving the 1251023.14. Kevin, just because it's probably not readily apparent to the committee, can you just walk them through the question you had for Mark and I in terms of the materials that we're paying for in this?
Yes.
That no one can see physically on the building yet?
Nope. So what we do during the process is that we allow the contractor to provide certificates of lien releases and transfer of titles to the owner that shows that equipment has been purchased, they'd like to get paid for. So it's a process where they have to show, we have to be allowed to go take a look at the equipment. We have a certificate of insurance that goes along with it. We have photograph documentation that the equipment is actually yours, printed on there, labels, everything else. So we were able to do that. The one question that we did have, and they were material that was in Uxbridge and in Oxford. So I went out there on Thursday or Friday, I believe it was, and we got the updated certificate of insurance, new photographs of all the equipment, went over their invoice list, counted every single thing, making sure. And it's mostly a lot of doors for the apparatus bay and electrical equipment, and, but yes, we showed that everything was there. That's what he's billing for. You'll probably see that more often, that they're gonna start billing for equipment that's being transferred to suppliers before they install it. And the only matter is, you must show us, give me the address, I must go take a look at it, photograph documentation, and that's it. It's a checks and balances.
Any questions for Kevin or Jeff on CTA's requisition? All right, so I'll move that we approve the requisition number 8 as presented. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Wood. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Project budget update. Kevin, do you have the?
Yep.
So this
I do.
should tie to everything that's in your packet. Did anyone have any questions while Kevin hands out kind of the larger print? Thank you. Is there any questions? There was no moving pieces. I had a discussion with Mr. Lemieux last week, and worked through some of his formulas, but I think that was the only change that happened, but that was in the packet that was sent out.
So Jason, can we do the math again real quick?
Yeah,
So, column C,
yes,
back out, 27, 28,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then add 80 on for the epoxy,
Yep.
right? And then add what as far as change orders that we know about that aren't in here.
Your mic, I think, is.
So then add on what as far as change orders that we know about that aren't in here.
I'm not aware of any, and I think we've
So you
asked.
think that's it?
I mean,
Okay.
I would carry something. It's not going to be zero for the next.
Well, it may be, if you look at the fact we got 150 in there for the computer network and whatever.
Oh yeah,
and-
if you're not looking, if you're netting, yes. If you're looking at absolute value, no.
So I'm netting,
Okay.
right? Okay, and then add on 5 for the full cost of the land, where they increased it almost to 5 by the time it was done.
Which is nowhere on this piece of paper.
I know, but I'm just trying to
Yep.
get to, you know what we're
Yep,
trying to
yep.
commit, the amount of the debt, which I still think is 24.2,
I will rework the math,
okay?
but I think that nothing has developed since. So what Kathy reached out and we've been working through with Mark is making sure that the town's debt schedule ties to where our budget is going to end up at the end of the day, not necessarily to what was approved at town meeting, so that as they project out and do their planning, to make sure it all ties into this documentation. So I had put a placeholder and no savings, because I didn't know the IT costs, so I think I had added 100,000 to that number, so no one's going to complain if it comes down. Obviously, someone would complain if it goes up. All right. Meeting schedule, we are on for March 11th, which is a Monday. I will let everyone know ASAP if something develops in between. Hopefully, we will have a tour between now and then.
Okay.
But that is obviously subject to the powers that be with the concrete. Any questions on scheduling going forward? Okay, any other business? I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Officer. All in favor? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.